Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I am still getting used to this haircut as I'm looking at myself on the monitor. But tonight I have an interesting head-to-head. I've been meaning to do this for a couple of days, and I really got to send these knives back to my buddy YD Knives, who loaned me this 940 and the Cold Steel Code 4 and the Spyderco Techno and the Microtech LUDT. So I need to get this shot so that I can get this back in the mail, because it's the only thing that I've been waiting for. But I've been saying pretty much since I got these, I'm not sure who brought up the comparison first, but it's one that definitely deserves to be done. I wanted to do a head-to-head video here between the Benchmade 940 and the Protech Malibu, because they're both aluminum scales, they are both reverse Tantos, and there's quite a few similarities between these knives. They're both US made, they're both EDC focused, they have, in my opinion, the same design philosophy and what their intended use is, and they're both, in this case, rocking deep carry clips. This one has it added, but it's still a Benchmade clip. This one's exactly the way it comes. But I just finished up doing it was a little over a week of testing with the 940. I'm about to finish up and do my full review on the Malibu, so I'm going to try not to spoil that video too much, but I feel like I'm at a point now where it's very clear to me how this is going to end up. I'll save the scoring until the end. I've got a little sheet here that I'll be making sure I hit all of these points, and I wrote down the prices of each of these, but I think this is worth exploring because the Benchmade 940 is a staple in the EDC world. It is a benchmark, but it's like 20 years old at this point. And I think much of its popularity, I said this in the full review I just did of it, I think much of its popularity is because it was popular, so it continues to be popular. I don't think that at this point in time, this is a compelling offering that is offering a good value, a good cutting performance. I think it's dated at this point, and I don't hate it. It is a good knife, but the Malibu, I genuinely think, is a great knife. I think this knife is going to be a big deal. It's already, with the Warney, been a pretty big deal. Now with the reverse Tanto starting to hit stores, from what I can tell, this blade shape is every bit as big of a deal, and I think Protech for a while is going to have a hard time making enough of this knife. And who knows, maybe there will be, just like the 940 now has a ton of different variants, maybe eventually there's going to be a ton of different variants of the Protech Malibu, and it's going to become a staple, because I think it should. And so I think with these being the same price and being marketed kind of the same way at this point in time, it's worth me diving into all of these categories that I typically score these types of videos on, and we discuss. So first, let's talk price, because that's important, right? Luckily, these two are $2.95 different. I would call that the same price. This, according to, I just looked on Blade HQ, I feel like that's a good reference where most people are going to shop for these knives. This base version of the 940 in S30V, aluminum, etc., you guys know the deal, is $187. So, $187. The Malibu is $189.95. So, $2.95 more, and in my opinion, that's equivalent. If $2.95 makes a big difference to you, and you're spending $187 on a knife you can't afford $189.95, then we have a different outlook. But they're basically identical in pricing. So they're both just sub $190, and that's where we're going to start off. So let's jump into the first category, being looks. Obviously, looks is subjective. Some people are going to be drawn to certain knives while others think they are ugly, etc. I personally have always thought the 940 looks good. I've never thought it's like one of the coolest looking knives ever. With the Malibu, again, I don't think this is going to be striking. I don't see it and think like, wow, what an innovative design. But it is very simplistic, very clean looking, and personally, I think it looks better. I think this blade shape looks a little bit better. I like the handle profile a little bit better. I like the way that everything is perfectly sterile on it. All of the laser marking is on the spine. So the show side, the only hardware you see is the stop pin, the pivot, and the button. I feel like that looks really cool, just how clean it is. Whereas when you look at the handle of the 940, let me deploy it so you can see it more clearly, there's a lot more hardware. It is kind of milled and shaped a little bit more, at least in a different way. They're both anodized. I think the Protech looks a little better. I don't think this one is like, wow, the Protech ran away with it. The Benchmade 940 is a good looking knife as well. I definitely don't think this is a bad looking knife, but I do personally think that the Malibu looks a little bit better. If you fall the other way on that, so be it. That's a subjective category, but I'm calling it 1 point to the Malibu, 0 points to the 940 in looks. Action. So if you've used an axis lock, you know what to expect from an axis lock. The 940 is an axis lock knife. This one, particularly, is good with the axis lock. This one is using slightly strengthened springs. I'll tag YD Knives down below. This is his knife. I don't know what springs these are, where he got them, etc. If you want to follow him on Instagram and shoot him a DM asking what springs these are. Sorry, I hope that that's not a flood of people who are now going to be bothering him, but he could probably let you know better than I could. So, that being said, it feels like an axis lock still. It functions great. It deploys like an axis lock deploys. It closes like an axis lock closes. I can spidey flick it. I can thumb flick it. I can use the axis lock itself, and I can just swing it out that way. All of the normal stuff there. Axis locks to me are fun and enjoyable. I have nothing against them, but they're not special in any way. Whereas on the Malibu, this action is special. To take a button lock and get it to be this crisp and to sing like it does, this deployment is just bananas. It is so ridiculously good. Not even saying like for a button lock it's good, just period. It's a really, really good action. The fact that it's a button lock though, and they still somehow give it a detent like that, my goodness. This action is going, people will fall in love with this. If you haven't used a Protech button lock, i.e. the Cambria, the Mordax, or this, which, spoiler alert, there's going to be a video very soon. I've got all three in my possession right now, so you guys are going to see them all side by side. But Protech, with their button lock manual knives, has already, with the Cambria and the Mordax both, they've accomplished really great actions. But this one just, it's like they've refined their craft a little bit more somehow. And people already raved about the one on the Mordax. The Cambria I think too, but less people know about the Cambria. Part of why I want to do that video. Anyways, this is a just runaway victory on action for the Malibu. It is, in my opinion, not even close. The 940 is fine. It's a totally usable action. Like I said, I'm never mad at axis locks personally. I find them pretty fun to fidget with. I find them functional. I find them pretty reliable. In fact, fully reliable. I've never had one fail on me. I feel like people say that a lot, but until I have it happen, I'm not going to act like it's a thing I've encountered. But this is special. That's just whatever. This is very special. So, action is going to go clearly to the Malibu. So, we've got 2 points Malibu, 0 points to 940 so far. Ergos. This one again can be a little bit subjective. This is going to be based on my extra medium hands and the way that I use my knives, the way that I enjoy them. So I've had these in my possession for almost the same amount of time. I've carried them almost the same amount because the 940, even though I had it for a little over a week before I did my full review, it only made it in pocket like 5 or 6 times because I wasn't so excited about it that I like wanted to carry it. Whereas this, even though it got here a little later, I have been so excited about that I want to carry it as much as possible. If I haven't been carrying it as a primary, it's often that it goes in my pocket as a secondary. There haven't been many days since I've gotten this where it hasn't made it in pocket at some point. So I've used both of these quite a bit as well. I've not only fidgeted with them and played with them a lot, but I've also cut with them pretty extensively to feel what they're all about. So, to me, I don't want to be a broken record, but the Malibu Zergos are a clear victory over the 940. The reasoning behind that is the shape of this handle. It's neutral enough while still being shaped enough that I feel way more locked into this knife. The 940, I don't feel like it's going to slip out of my hand, but it definitely doesn't feel nearly as secure as this knife does. If I'm in a hammer grip on each of these knives, the sensation of how stuck to this knife I am compared to this knife, it's very apparent to me from my hands. These ergos not only make me feel more locked in, but I also find them more comfortable. Neither of these knives are very hot spotty, but the 940 has jimping here, has jimping back here. The way that the spine, sorry, I'm going to block my eyes so that you can focus on the knife. The way that the spine interfaces with this little notch right here, I don't like this nub that separates handle scale from spine, that it dips down. I vastly prefer it when it's one straight line and I don't have this little drop off here. Like this, where I have this perfectly straight, smooth surface so that no matter where my thumb lands on here, whether it's all the way up front or all the way back onto the handle scales, it's a nice even platform, and for push cuts it just feels so much better. I find on here my thumb wants to land right where that nub is, and it just drives me nuts, frankly. I don't like that about the 940. The ergos are neutral enough that virtually anybody is going to be comfortable on this knife. It's not uncomfortable, but it's nothing excellent to me. Like, if they would say the shining feature of this knife is its ergos, then we either have different taste or very different hands. Because to me, the ergos are just fine on here. They're nothing to write home about. Whereas the ergos on the Malibu, I don't want to sound like a broken record where every category I'm like, it's nailing it. But this is becoming one of my favorite knives, period. It's so good in hand. Like, really, really good. So, ergos, big win to the Malibu. So that's 3-0 right now. Let's talk fit and finish. So both of these knives, from where I stand, are well made. Benchmade has had its issues with quality control, fit and finish, stuff like that. And I've personally had knives that come out of the box that are not totally satisfactory to me, whereas Protech I've never had any issues. I've had less Protechs though than I have Benchmades. But let's talk about these two specifically because they're what I've got in front of me. So this 940 is an excellent example of a 940. In terms of its fit and finish, there is blade play. Most Benchmades with an axis lock that's set up to drop like this, I find you kind of have to tune it with blade play. So is it going to cause a mechanical failure or get the knife to break on me because it has that? Not necessarily. Would it be better if it could do that without blade play? 100%. Blade play is never a good thing. So there's a little blade play. Not so much front to back. It's like the slightest wiggle front to back, but side to side. There's definitely a little bit of slop in there. Other than that, the scales are finished well, the anodizing is done well. There's a little scuff on this one that was there thankfully before I got it. I'd feel bad if I scuffed this knife while it was in my possession. But the aluminum is done well, the edges are all chamfered, everything is set in nicely. I've heard some people complain that the clip screws stick out beyond the frame. I don't know if when he put this mini deep carry clip on here he swapped to shorter screws. I'm assuming he didn't because they look like they're the screws that would have come in this knife and they don't stick through. So fit and finish on this 940 is good. There's the little bit of blade play. Other than that, everything is what you'd expect out of this knife. Over here, not a hint of blade play. Like, supremely solid lockup. All the way out to the tip. If I'm putting a significant amount of force on this frame. There's nothing. No blade play. I know sometimes people say no blade play, and what they mean is very little blade play. This, side to side, no blade play. Front to back, there is just the smallest smidge of play, but it almost just feels like, I don't know, it's a tiny, tiny bit of play. It doesn't even look like it's really like coming off the stop pin or anything. It's just this littlest wiggle. So, tiny, tiny bit of front to back, somewhat significant amount side to side on the 940. Other than that, let's look at fit and finish of the scales themselves. All of the edges pristinely finished, milled, the anodizing perfectly even, consistent. The hardware and the clip definitely seems nicer than the hardware and clip on the Benchmade. The grade that they use here, I assume, is just better. Also, the way that they do their clip itself from Protech, if you can see down in there, the clip is set into the scale of the handle, and the screws are countersunk into the clip, which is set into the handle. So the line that is the surface of the scale does not raise for clip and does not raise for hardware. It stays perfectly flush all the way across. That should become the new standard. That is the way to do a deep carry clip. It's just excellent. So, again, I think this is a category that the Protech doesn't run away with, but to me it's pretty clear on fit and finish. When I hold these two knives, I get the sensation that this is nicer. It's not by $1 million, but this knife feels to me like it should be worth at least 50 bucks more than this knife. It's worth $2.95 more retail. So it's going to win that category. So what are we at now? 4-0? All right, value. We're playing with really similar materials until you talk blade steel. Then you're looking at S30V here on the Benchmade, and you're looking at CPM 20CV here on the Protech. And from what I've heard of the way that Protech is finishing their CPM 20CV from the Mordax, etc., I'm not sure if anyone has done testing on a Malibu yet, but I've heard very good things. And 20CV is objectively, chemically speaking, a superior steel to S30V in terms of edge retention, in terms of toughness. I think in terms of corrosion resistance, they're at least equal. It might not be quite as easy to sharpen. That's not the way I judge a steel. So, to me, with all other materials being essentially the same between these two knives, the blade steel alone, it's a big jump from S30V to 20CV. So, value, with them being $3 more. If $295 on any knife that came in S30V. Imagine it's a Spyderco, and it comes in S30V, and it's a model that there aren't any sprint runs or exclusives or anything in. It's just S30V is your only option. If you could at checkout choose for $295 to upgrade that steel to 20CV, I don't know a single person who wouldn't do it. 20CV is worth more than $3 increase. So, value, naturally, the Malibu. Plus, as I mentioned in fit and finish, this knife feels nicer to me. There's an inherent quality when I feel a knife. I don't know if you guys do this too, but where I don't know, I feel like I make judgments on a knife as to whether it feels tangibly like it's worth the amount of money it costs. And I love it when I find knives that feel nicer than they do cost. There's other times where I get a knife that feels like it's either fair or they may be asking a little too much for it. Hint, hint, over here. This one feels like they could be asking more for it, and they rightfully sell a lot still. So, value, Malibu, hands down. So that puts us at 5-0. So, next is carry. Both of these are lightweight. Both of these are aluminum. Both of these are slender. If you look at them, the Malibu, let me see if I can put this in a way that you can see even better. The Malibu is going to be a hair shorter. They're really about identical in width. If you're looking at the widest portion here, they're about the same width. They both weigh, to me, about the same. I'm not going to put them on a scale to verify that because I don't have a scale. But they're both wearing deep carry clips. They both pocket. Excellent. They're really very close. What I'm going to say is going to differentiate this one is the real difference to me, genuinely, that I can notice slipping this in and out of pocket, is the quality of the clip itself. The mini deep carry clip from Benchmade is a good clip. I run this clip on every Benchmade that I currently own, except for my super old Sentinel, which has its original clip because I'm not going to change anything on that knife. But every single Benchmade that I own right now, the bug out and the bailout, obviously, but also the Mini Freak, Dash 1, whatever you want to call it, and the Super Freak are all wearing mini deep carry clips. This is my preferred clip. But Protech's deep carry milled clip, I don't know what wizardry they use to accomplish this clip. It's one of the best clips, period, in my opinion. Just excellent. So carry's going to go to this again. And one thing I should mention as well, if you watch my first impressions of this knife, I met up with my buddy Matt, who works at Protech and does some of their QC and some of their final packaging and stuff, and he took this clip off, quickly adjusted it for me, and now there's no more rattle or ting from the clip when I'm using the action on this knife, because when I did my first impressions there was. And he watched it and he's like, hey dude, when I see you, bring that so I can fix it. And he did in 2 seconds. So I imagine it's something I also could have done at home if I knew that I should have, but that's worth mentioning as well. Anyway, carry goes to the Protech. So we're at 6-0. Now the final, the 7th of 7 category that I'm going to talk about is cutting. So I mentioned in my full review of the 940 that it's okay at cutting. The design philosophy of the 940, you can tell by looking at it. They were trying to make a slim knife. The whole thing is slender, all the way across. And because we have a slim blade, because it's not taller in this dimension, we don't have that much room for this grind. And this grind is a flat grind, right? Is it hollow? I think it might actually be hollow. Now that I'm looking at it, it's like, it seems like it's got the slightest curve in it. Either way, if it's a hollow grind, it's such a shallow curve that it feels like a flat grind to the touch, and what I'm getting at is it doesn't get thin behind the edge. It's frankly what I would consider pretty thick behind the edge for an EDC knife. I don't know if there's variation in these, if some of them are ground thinner than others or what, but this one, the one I can go off of, is not that thin. It's sharp, it's got a great edge on it, and it cuts fine. It really, for the average EDC task and for the average person who's going to have this knife in their pocket, they're not going to be disappointed by the cutting of this knife. But when I really try to, like, when I've cut with this while having other knives out and open and tried to compare it to other knives like my PM2 or even my Shaman, this cuts more like my Shaman does than like my PM2 does. The Shaman is a knife that I consider kind of an outdoor folder, and it's like purposely a little thick behind the edge because it's a robust knife. This knife is not robust. This knife feels like it would be way better suited to actually be ground really slicey. That's just the way I see it. If you disagree and you think this knife should be kind of robust in its philosophy of use for you, then so be it. But at the end of the day, the Malibu is thinner behind the edge, noticeably so. I prefer this blade shape, the way that it's one constant, perfectly gradual belly the whole way along, and the edge on this one is sharper than that one was. That one's not brand new, so I'm not going to necessarily judge that against it. That knife was used before it came to me. This knife was brand new, but this factory edge is sharper than any factory edge I've gotten on any Benchmade, so that's worth saying. And it just hands down, when I've cut with this knife, it's done better than that knife has, for anything that I've used it for, whether it's something delicate like opening an envelope or cutting the tape on a package. The way that this tip works and the profile, the angle of everything, it's very good for that delicate stuff, especially with the ergos and how easy it is to use a variety of grips on this knife. But then also for the harder tasks, going through significant amounts of cardboard. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, when was it? A couple days ago, I was at my sister-in-law's place helping to install like a window AC unit. And so first of all, I was going through all the cardboard because there was a box within a box and all that stuff, and I was cutting into it. And then once I was in the process of getting the thing installed, there was this thick, dense foam, like not at all like styrofoam. It had like just the littlest bit of give to it, but it's designed to like insulate the gaps that where the window has to be open slightly for the thing to fit. Anyway, I had to cut several sections of this to fill the gaps. And I had this knife as my secondary that day. It was in my back pocket, but I was trying to use it because I'm getting ready to review it, right? And this knife, the way that it went through that material, it was just absolutely excellent at it. It was a dense, kind of hard, abrasive material, and it was thick. It was a lot of it. And the ease with which I could just push cut right through it and slice, like it worked really, really well. So not only do I feel like its profile and grind and all of that is superior to the 940, but it's freaking 20 CV compared to S30V. If you're at all like me, that makes a big difference. So this is not only going to, in terms of its profile, have better cutting performance, but the steel is going to have better performance, and it's going to hold its edge longer, and it's just, in my opinion, vastly superior in that category as well. So that gives us a 7 out of 7. 7-0 win for the Malibu to the 940. And it doesn't surprise me one bit. When I was thinking through this a little bit, I honestly hadn't scored this prior to starting the video, but I was trying to think of one of these categories over the last couple of days that the 940 could possibly win over the Malibu. And to me, it's not there. It's really not. And the reality in my head is that this knife is a benchmark that has become very dated. It's like a 20-year-old design. And it's still a good knife. There's so much about this knife that is fine. If anyone tells me that their favorite knife is the 940, I'm not even going to judge them for that. That's fine if it's your favorite. But a knife that came out right now, that is brand new, in updated materials with a design that literally just came to market, should be better than the 940. There's a lot of stuff that comes out that's brand new that isn't better than a 940. I'm not trying at all to say that everything that comes out now is inherently better than something that came out 20 years ago. That's not the case. But something this good that just came out right now that I think is going to become kind of the 940 of the marketplace if Protech plays their cards right and is able to make enough of them and is able to market it right and all that. This, to me, in all 7 categories that I score in for this kind of thing, is demonstrably better. And I'd be willing to bet even the people who are die-hard 940 fanboys who love this knife, they'd probably also love this knife. Because there's enough that's similar about it. It's not by any means a copy of the 940. It's wildly different in many ways. But it kind of has a similar sensation when you're holding it. Because they're both aluminum. And they both have kind of the same... The finish on the anodization feels similar. And they're a similar size. And they both feel somewhat neutral in hand. Their shaping isn't like super groovy, and it's not trying to force you into a single grip, and there's enough that's similar about them that I bet 940 guys would love it. Plus this one's a reverse Tanto. If you love a 940, you probably love that it's a reverse Tanto. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully this was a worthwhile exercise. I know quite a few people have been bugging me to get this one done. There's a lot of people who wanted to see this one take place, along with a couple of other head-to-heads that are about to happen. I won't film them tonight, but they're coming soon. So anyway, this has been plenty long-winded at this point. I've said quite a bit on this subject. So let's go ahead and seal the deal on this. Let's call it good. But the clear winner, 7-0, the way that I score it, Bearded Gear, take it for what it's worth, 7-0, Protech Malibu. It's just, this is such a good knife. My full review is going to come really soon. You're probably going to hear a lot of the things that I mentioned in these strengths in that review if you watch this video and then that one. But if there's a knife that I'm comfortable recommending after just having it for a couple of days in pocket, there's a few knives that pretty quickly I fall in love with and feel confident in to go ahead, and when people ask, hey, is that a good knife, should I buy one, I can say yes. But the Protech Malibu, undoubtedly, especially in this reverse Tanto being my preference, if you're considering one and you're wondering if it's worth it, I couldn't say yes loudly enough. It is absolutely a knife that I think people should own. And even if, like, I had a Mordax, personally, and I loved the Mordax, and maybe you're somebody who has that already and wants to get another one, this is different enough from the Mordax. It's wildly different from the Mordax in terms of its size, the way it carries. There's a lot about it that's different. The mechanism is going to feel very, very similar, but it's different enough, too. So, I don't know, it's just a really, really exciting new offering, and I genuinely think it has potential to be 940 levels of popular for years and years with how good this actually is. It's just phenomenal. So, take all that for what it's worth coming from somebody like me, but this has been fun and interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was fun for me to score it finally and see how much this ran away with it. It couldn't have been a clearer victory. So anyway, this has been fun. Appreciate all of you for watching. Appreciate all of my subscribers, those of you who comment, those of you who follow me on Instagram, those of you who buy t-shirts, those of you who buy stickers, those of you who are Patreon patrons. Thank you so much. All of you. Appreciate it. Having a blast. This is a good time. So I will talk to you all soon, and we'll let that be that.